everywhere, sometimes without stopping, sometimes.
Here I go, here I go.
Anti-Eddie Ping, Silver. Grüße, sagte Terre, Penny Pings. Categorie, imagine by the wizard, Worksfrau.
Here I go, anti-Eddie Ping.
Is it some William Brixit one these days? So it's some other.
Here I go, anti-Eddie Ping.
Oh, oh.
It functions everywhere, sometimes without stopping, sometimes discontinuously. It breathes, it heats, it eats, it shits, it fucks. One mistake ever said the it everywhere. It is machines, not at all metaphorically. Machines of machines with their couplings, their connections. An organ machine is connected with a source machine. One emits a flux, which the other cuts. The breast is a machine that produces milk, and the mouth, a machine coupled to that one. The mouth of the anorexic hesitates between an eating machine, an anal machine, a talking machine, a breathing machine, deeper machine, asthma, attack. This is why we are all tinkerers, each with their own little machines. An organ machine for an energy machine. There are always flux and cuts. Judge Schreber 5 has divine rays in his ass. Solar anus. And rest assured it works. Judge Schreber feels something, produced of something, and theorized about it. Something is being deduced effects of machines, not metaphors. Stroll of the schizophrenic. It's a better model than the neurotic lying on the couch. A bit of fresh air, a relationship with the outside. Take the stroll of Lenz into the outdoors. It is different from moments when Lenz finds himself with his good pastor, who forces him to situate himself socially in relation to God, in relation to Father, in relation to Mother. On the contrary, he is in the mountains under the snow with other gods or without God at all, without family, without father or mother, with nature. What does my father want? Can he give me better? Impossible! Leave me alone. Everything is a machine. And three celestial machines, the stars are rainbows, alpine machines, each coupled with those of his body, noise machine. Uninterrupted, idling to mutter. It must feeling of endless bliss to be in contact with the profound, life profound to every form. To have a soul for the rocks, metals, water, and plants, to welcome into oneself, as in a dream, every element of nature, like flowers that breathe with the waxing and waning of the moon. Både det langsomt begissage where, både die die multidodging ned, in and never replies. Krongasam be a chlorophylling machine or a photosynthesis machine, or at least slip his body as a part into such machines. Lenz put himself before the distinction of man nature, before all the identifications that this distinction conditions.
In theory, we are live and set up and going, which is nice and exciting, I know. Hey, everyone. I hope all of you are well. Welcome to Saturdays with the QC, where we usually go over kind of whatever the fuck I'm feeling about and what people sort of need help with. Today, we're going to be doing a little bit of time with a paragraph or two in Anti-Oedipus, because this last week's reading was slow and good and kind of deeply challenging in some of the phrasing, and I want to spend time going over it in depth. And then we're going to move on to me working my way through trying to actually finally finish my script for the upcoming video on symbolic logic and why symbolic logic matters and how to read books and things like that for how-to philosophy. So that'll be fun, I think. But today, it's much less. Today, it's much, much less. We are going over this. Boop, 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 ba-doo. Boop, boop, ba-doo. Thank you for the captions for boop, boop, doo. So, for those of you here and in Discord, we're continuing the first positive task of schizoanalysis, which is its own journey. If I seem a bit out of it, it's because we did a late stream last night where I watched Andor and somehow came around on the show, which is its own. It's like a fucking epic poem, but it's its own thing. So I'm a little out of it and getting my caffeine in me. But this last week, we're continuing into this, but we're specifically moving into the way that the death drive or life drive operates, really within kind of everything here. They don't, and as they've kind of said before, they're not really throwing out everything Freud did. They're certainly not getting rid of the idea of death or eliminating that. They're not getting rid of the idea of life. They're not getting rid of the idea of, symbolic elements or what they are, but they're placing them in a different position within a machinic unconscious that is much more material, that offers an ontology that is proficient across everything. So we don't have odd little things like, yes, I'm a materialist. No, ideality is not material. But then, wait, what? That kind of mentality we're kind of hiding from. At least I'm hiding from. And I find it frustrating. So we're going to spend a little bit of time there, basically in this paragraph and the next, because I want to make sure that my understanding is better, but also if anyone has issues with kind of anywhere in Anti-Oedipus, don't hesitate to drop a question. This is literally open offices. So drop a question in text. I'll make my way through it. We'll slowly get to where we're going and we'll see kind of what happens as we do it. Yeah, that's it. Any questions, any notes, any strong disagreements? That's great. Works for me then. So we will go ahead and just read and reread and read and reread. This will be fun. So we're at, to be very specific in AO, 331. We've just gone through the shifting of focus that schizoanalysis makes. Instead of the symbolic evidence of things, which is what psychoanalysis drives for. Psychoanalysis pushes for what's your relationship with your mother or father? Oh, this person exists in your life as a position of authority. That's a symbol of your father. It runs by allegory or analogy, metaphor, metonymy, the ability for things to sort of be stretched out and shifted to meaning in order to sort of help make sense of elements. But schizoanalysis plays differently here, significantly. Instead of those, we're focusing on functives, as they call it, or functions, the indices of elements. So instead of the symbol being the focus, the symbol is sort of the end of the line. And instead what you should be focusing on is the wiring that gets there, the intensive elements, the indices of passions and desire that power all of these things and really where they're sitting. And it is a very significant shift, at least for me. Maybe others make it easier. I have found the shift to be more difficult to begin making that grasp, because it's very easy in our world, and the way that most people across everything tend to talk of things is in that symbolic, metaphorical, transitive way, where a thing moves from one way to another or one place to another. I find it, that I grew up with, that I know. This is a very different way to consider how we consider these things. Which sounds, repetitive. It is. It's a complicated thing. And so when we start talking about how these things operate or how they work, the important part is to get to, for them, the molecular chain. And it's not a matter of seeing what is on the chain, which is, I think, traditionally how psychoanalysis talks about these things. We talk about I fucking have a TED Talk where I talk about this for Zizek, Lacan, and others. The symbolic chain, the way meaning sort of connects other things to other things, and finding how those meanings are connected. For Lacan, the focus is a mix between the chain itself and what is on it, it's like the symbols and all of that. But Guattari and I think Deleuze here take it far more where it's about sort of getting rid of the chain in that way, and the symbols, and instead talking about it in terms of the pieces of pieces, not whole symbols, but the chains of molecular elements. That's what they say a moment or two ago. It's another case altogether with the properly molecular chain. And so far as the BWO is non-specific and non-specified support that marks the molecular limit of the molar aggregates, the chain no longer has any function than that of deterritorializing the flux, causing them to pass through the signifying wall, thereby undoing the codes. The function of the chain is no longer that of coding flux on the full body of Earth, despot, or capital, but on the contrary, that of decoding them on the full body without organs. It's a chain of escape, no longer a chain of code. Signifying chain has become a chain of decoding, deterritorialization, which must be apprehended and can only be apprehended as the reverse of codes and territorialities. This isn't necessarily driving us in a way that's like, oh, the signifying chain is bullshit, but it's instead a shifting of how to look at it. Guattari wrote a lot about this. This is very much from him. But this, again, is why they got along so well after reading Logic of Sense. As I said, the signifying chain before for Lacan is elements are connected. How they're connected, you kind of make your way up to master signifier, which is the thing that sort of helps determine the meaning for everything else. But it's not really that anymore. They talk about this in a very particular way, because it's not that the signifying chain never was a thing or never happened. As they talk about it, the signifying chain is about coding flux on the full body of Earth, the despot, or capital. This is the thing left over from the socius, the despotic socius, where we have a singular point of meaning that determines everything else, through which we know logically what everything else is. That's the despot. The symbolic chain might do this also through other things, but it's this piece of the system. The chain of escape that exists here, this molecular chain, is different. This is where the signifying chain becomes a chain of decoding and deterritorialization. It's one that, while it on the surface has behaviors that are the same and it outputs meaning in what seems to be the same way, it is not one of actually coding flux, but instead decoding flux, deterritorializing it, because it is the reverse of codes and territorialities. The molecular chain is still signifying, because it is composed of signs of desire. But these signs are no longer signifying, given the fact that they are under the order of the included disjunctions where everything is possible. I'm going to keep going because I have examples for this, but I really want to sort of make my way a little bit further, and then we'll go to the other bit, because this is, again, the process of how we make sense of things, or how subjectivity is produced, how meaning is made by everyone, and again, how the very nature of the social order sort of falls back on and comes back on desiring production, and how desiring production ultimately demands its own oppression, which is the core question of the book. So as Jacques Monod says, we must conceive of a machine that is such by its functional properties but not by its structure, where nothing but the blind play of combinations can be discerned. This goes back to when we read the Daniel Smith essay on the body without organs, which is, again, excellent in the QC. If you haven't read it, I cannot tell you enough that you need to. Where he goes through and he explains a couple of the examples they give, but he does it through the point of talking through the blind play of elements being the sort of core function at the base of this. The way that a knife rest, we can look at a knife rest and see that it is a block. But if I show you a block and I ask, what is this? You're not going to say it's a knife rest. You're going to go, it's a fucking little block of metal. But it's a knife rest. Because the shape of the thing, or the shape that it seems to have, or the combination of whatever, these things are like almost irrelevant. Instead, it's the process of building it and its genealogy of creation that gives it the purpose that it does. It's not so much the shape of the thing, but instead how it's functional, not its structure, which is what Minot's saying here. Nothing but the blind play of blind combinations can be discerned. It is precisely the ambiguity of what biologists call a genetic code that enables us to understand this kind of situation. For if the corresponding chain effectively forms codes, and as much as it folds into exclusive molar configurations, it undoes the codes by unfolding along a molecular fiber that includes all the possible figures. Similarly, in Lacan, the symbolic organization of the structure, with its exclusions that come from the function of the signifier, has as its reverse side the real inorganization of desire. The chain as it operates necessarily exists in, as we're looking at it, the organized way, the organization of the structure, but the very other side of it, the very other side, is necessarily that of real inorganization and real desire. And that's, again, the top here that they say, the properly molecular chain. They're talking about a different way to consider these things. We're in first positive task of schizoanalysis, making our way right now to 328. But I want to move forward a little bit too, because we're going to jump a bit. We're going to be talking about death. Death is the focus today. And it's not because I've gone emo, but because death is kind of like a big deal to this. We had trouble with it this last reading. I shouldn't say we. I say we because it's easier for my ego. I had trouble with it this week. Whew. So, to read. The body without organs is the model of death. The authors of horror stories have understood well, it is not death that serves as a model for catatonia. It is catatonic schizophrenia that gives its model to death. Zero intensity. We have this idea when we talk about death that death as a concept or idea came first, that it is a transcendent, natural thing that we are going to have to deal with. And there is some reality that we all die, all of that stuff, blah, blah, blah. But it's kind of put us in a weird position because it isn't so much that we have the idea of death first. It's actually that the zero intensity of things came first and gave us a model for death. Now we have the concept of death that's built off of that, or the organization of it as a symbol of death, however you want to talk about it. But that thing, the death model, appears when the BWO repels the organs and lays them aside. There's no mouth, no tongue, no teeth. The point of self-mutilation, the point of suicide. Yet there is no real opposition between the body without organs and organs as partial objects. The only real opposition is to the molar organism that is their common enemy. You, me, us as a totality, the organization that is Brooks. What is Brooks? That thing. This is the organization of it all. The opposition is not to partial objects to BWO. Their common enemy is the organization at the molar level. In the desiring machine, one sees the same catatonic, inspired by the immobile motor that forces him to put aside his organs to immobilize them and silence them, but also impelled by the working parts that work in an autonomous or stereotyped fashion to reactivate the organs, to reanimate them with local movements. It's a question of different parts of the machine, different and coexisting, and different in their very coexistence. When they have their section in the book, the whole and its parts, right? They go through, and the best example still, there's other great examples, but it's In Search of Lost Time, the book series. When I say the book series, it's a totality. It's the whole. The whole is that. But what is In Search of Lost Time about? There is no answer to that. The joke, it's even a Monty Python sketch. The championship of summarizing Proust, because no one can summarize Proust, and that's kind of the point. There somehow is a hole with In Search of Lost Time, because we can talk about it. We're aware that there's a thing, but describing it is tough. And at the same time, there are all of the parts, all the different books that make up In Search of Lost Time. And all of those books and the whole that we create are all parts. They're a thing that works differently, but they are different parts of the machine that is the totality of In Search of Lost Time. The work that it does, how it does them, what it builds, all these things. It is different parts of the machine, different and coexisting and different in their coexistence. And death is no different than this. Death is a totality that's sort of assigned as a heat death or whatever, but it's kind of this odd interaction of the BWO and how these things come together. It's a model. The BWO as zero intensity is the model for death. Hence, it is, to continue, it is absurd to speak of death desire that would presumably be in qualitative opposition to life. Death is not desired. There is only death that desires, by virtue of the body without organs, or the immobile motor. There is also life that desires, by virtue of the working organs. There we do not have two desires, but two parts, two kinds of desiring machine parts in the dispersion of the machine itself. On the one hand, we have the BWO, the model of death, the model of total stability. Total stability is not necessarily good. Total stability is heat death. It is catatonia. It is a self-stable dying system that doesn't do anything. The desiring machines are not a life system, but they're connecting to whatever they're doing. They're always creating something new. And the model of death that then comes back to the desiring machines, it goes back to the model of death, life, death. This isn't really life or death that's being desired. It's the model of each one, the model that's setting them up. These two kinds of desiring machine parts, as they say. And they say, how can all it function together? For it's not functioning, but solely the non-structural condition of molar functioning. The functioning appears when the motor, under the preceding conditions, without ceasing to be immobile and without forming an organism, which is kind of that middle ground space. It hasn't stopped, it hasn't without ceasing to be immobile, without forming an organism. It hasn't done those things yet. Attracts to the body without organs, appropriates them for itself in the apparent objective movement. This is the apparent objective movement of the way I should be, the way I ought to be, the apparent objectivity. Repulsion, then, is the condition of the machine's functioning. But attraction is the functioning itself. Repulsion and attraction are both part of it, but the attraction is the function. But it's got the oscillation as part of it. The oscillation to the model, oscillation to the heat death, oscillation to the other part. The attraction is the functioning. That the functioning depends on repulsion is clear to us, inasmuch as all this works only by breaking down. One is then able to say what this running or functioning consists of. In the cycle of desiring machine, it is a matter of constantly translating, constantly converting death model into something else, which is the experience of death, converting the death that rises from within into the death that comes from without. The language here is, again, very particular as I'm reading it, because we talk about the death that rises from within the BWO, which is the model for death, catatonia. But the death that comes from without is the actual interactions on body without organs. These are two types of ways to consider death. But again, this is the running, the functioning, the cycle of the desire machine, translating, converting death into something else, converting the heat death, the entropy, the absolute non-movement, the catatonia of things to something else. Back to something else and back and to something else. And then that consistent stability that is being created dies. As I described it, and I stand by this after a decent amount of reading, at some point I get hungry or I decide that I'm going to be drinking. Again, not singular. This is not a matter of like, I decide, but I go, hey, this is a collection of desiring machines that are functioning, that are generating a very particular model that is being seen and experienced in totality. And then the desire machines continue, and I drink. But in this, the subject is going, I am thirsty for tea. And that's like Thirsty Brooks. And then I took a drink, and Thirsty Brooks dies. And then there's like not Thirsty Brooks or whatever the fuck comes next. Like, death is all over the place. Death is everywhere. It's everywhere. I thought Brooks already started with the deathing experiences. I did. I'm rereading. That's what we're doing. I'm rereading here, LJ. And you're up to Death Drive and Coldness and Cruelty. It's a very good section. Coldness and Cruelty, which took a break this week. We have multiple readings on the QC. Please join the Discord. Ben has been running that. And Coldness and Cruelty is a very, very, very good read. Very good read. On YouTube, Values Last Tango says, is the knife rest an example of partial objects? I'm going to say no. When we name a thing, when we call a thing, when we're talking about a thing, yes, the partial objects are operant everywhere. I don't think that's what you mean, though. When we call something a knife rest or kind of anything, the knife rest as we see it exists because of its function. It is, if you haven't seen a knife rest, it's just literally a little block. It can be wood too, but it's a little block that could just as easily be a toy my kids use to build towers as it is a knife rest. The shape of the thing, the structure of it, like natively, doesn't actually make it what it is. Its use makes it what it is, but it's not even really its use. It came about for these certain purposes in very particular ways, and so we're able to see sort of the connected tissue. And this is the thing that Smith goes through in his discussion of the BWO, that there's this really particular movement where we're talking about this sort of scattering of everything on one side, but then the BWO, which is a solidification. But it's the process of the shifting where we start talking about the machinic, which we tend to talk about machines as being sort of what they produce. A machine is what they produce. And we tend to talk about organisms on the other side is like what they are. Like what they are. And that is kind of what they're shifting and changing. Is a chopstick rest better than a knife rest? They're the same kind of thing. It's a chopstick rest may be better for other people than a knife rest. Knife rest is a very Western and actually very European and actually kind of out of date thing already. But it is a 50-year-old book, so, you know. And I'm not sure etiquette has carried forward very strongly in the Western world. But also, I tend to make my own chopstick rest out of my chopstick paper at restaurants I go to. But clearly not fancy ones, I know. But this is the play they're making the shift with death. Is there any overlap with Hans Jones' account of death? Plays significantly different to me. And again, this is a to me thing. I add that because I'm not super familiar with, a lot of these things. I try to be read, but there's only so many things I can say I've read literally like over and over and over and over and over. But if I'm going back a bit, it isn't so much that death and life are intrinsically connected. That's not really what D&G are going for here. In fact, they kind of are stepping aside from the idea that there is a such thing as a transcendent death or a transcendent life. That death and life are not really connected or part of the same thing, but instead models and elements that are within the very activity that produces itself, the desiring production. So the next paragraph, I think, gets into this, and this is we're almost where I wanted to get to today. So we're just going to keep going. Within this, if you've read Nietzsche, eternal return moment, just a big, giant flag warning, so that way you can be putting this in the right direction. It's through Klossowski. So if you haven't read Vicious Circle, you're a step or two away, but it's fine too. But it seems things are becoming very obscure. For what is this distinction between the experience of death and the model of death? Here again, is it a death desire, a being for death, or rather an investment of death, even if speculative? They're going through Freud and Heidegger and a little bit of other people, and then also sort of this, Keynesian model of death, which is kind of like meant to be a little bit modern jokey. It's none of these, though. It's none of these. The experience of death is the most common of occurrences in the unconscious, precisely because it occurs in life and for life, in every passage or becoming, in every intensity as passage or becoming. It is in the very nature of every intensity to invest itself within itself, the zero intensity starting from which it is produced in one moment, as that which grows or diminishes according to an infinity of degrees. The intensities and wavering of things and sensations and experience and all of that ultimately dance on the BWO and ultimately produce the surfaces from which the subjectivities are produced. These things are born not of nothing, but they're aware of nothing. They're not born of nothing, but they're born of zero, the zero intensity. They become from that, and they are aware of it, and they invest in that as part of it. The very nature of a positive sort of movement necessitates an understanding of where it came from and its position. This is the Klossowski line. An afflux, a surge forth, is necessary merely to signify the absence of intensity. It's a really important line here. The absence of intensity, the heat death of things. The afflux may merely signify it, but it's necessary to signify it. We've attempted to show in this respect how the relations of attraction and repulsion produce such states, sensations, and emotions, which imply a new energetic conversion and form the third kind of synthesis, the synthesis of conjunction. One might say that the unconscious, as a real subject, has scattered an apparent residual and nomadic subject around the entire compass of its cycle, a subject that passes by way of all the becomings, corresponding to the included disjunctions. The last part of the desiring machine, the adjacent part. These intense becomings and feelings, these intensive emotions, feed deliriums and hallucinations. We'll start again in a second. Delirium and hallucination is very particular terms here. These are words that are very much used improperly in a ton of different ways today and colloquially. I am an American. Delirium. It is. Shared deliriums, understandings of the world. And again, this is not intended. It's these words, you're hallucinating. It's just a delirium. Delirium tremens is one of my favorite beers, but it specifically is about drinking so much you see pink elephants. It tends to be a presumption of a negative or non-existent thing, overdoing an existence that's incorrect. They're not making that statement. Instead, what they're talking about is this sort of way that socially, the delirium of everything. I am an honest man. Oh, I belong to a club of good people. Oh, I teach philosophy. Oh, you listen to philosophy. We know philosophy. These deliriums, all of these are deliriums. They're not necessarily incorrect or correct. That's not really the point for them. That's not really the point at all. And hallucinations are the same thing. Hallucinations in a psychiatric patient or someone who's been committed may be extreme. They may be seeing bats and snakes all over them. It may be like Scarecrow and Batman, making you see all stuff that's not there. But that's just as effective, and it's just the same process as seeing stuff that is there. That thing that happens that allows us to process these things comes from us. We see them, we produce them, we are produced in them. So when we talk about this, and we say the intense becomings and feelings, these intensive emotions, these feed deliriums and hallucinations. But in themselves, these intensive emotions are closest to the matter whose 0 degree they invest in itself. They control the unconscious experience of death, insofar as death is what is felt in every feeling, what never ceases and never finishes happening in every becoming. In the becoming another sex, becoming God, becoming a race, forming zones of intensity on the BWO. Every intensity controls within its own life the experience of death and envelops it. And it is doubtless the case that every intensity is extinguished at the end, that every becoming itself becomes a becoming death. It's built into the cycle of the whole thing. Death then does actually happen. Blanchot distinguishes this twofold nature clearly, these two irreducible aspects of death. The one, according to which the apparent subject never ceases to live and travel as a one never stops and never has done with dying. That's this me, the subject. The other, according to which this same subject, fixed as I, actually dies, which is to say it finally ceases to die, since it ends up dying in the reality of a last instant that fixes it this way as an I, all the while undoing the intensity and carrying it back to the zero that envelops it. The intensity that created my thirst. Let's kill Thirsty Brooks. Because he was dying constantly. The creation of it, the intensity, the growth of it, still dying. But at some point, it ceases to die. Satisfaction experienced, it ends up actually dying as it was fixed in what it was, as it becomes actualized and totalized and hardened, almost like a sandcastle encased in glue that simply can't change but is somehow extremely brittle. It just goes back into everything, constantly the virtual becoming the actual, and the process of death is built into the virtual, but actual death is the actualization of the thing. It ends up dying as it becomes fixed this way as an I. I don't die, but I become fixed that way as that I becomes fixed that way. And it undoes the intensity, carrying it back to the zero that envelops it, which then will be enveloped by new intensities and so on and so on and so on. Because it still says hallucinations are still motivated. They're produced and inflected by the same things we perceive. Yes, I didn't mean to say it. I said it very quickly because I'm trying to pass through it fast. But the whole point of their discussion about Trevor is not that he didn't have sunbeams out of his ass, but instead, hey, he experienced sunbeams coming out of his ass, and he was able to tell you about them, how they worked, the functionality of them, the timing of it, the pressures of it. It's all of that is so fucking real to him. It's not just simply that he saw a thing that didn't impact anything else in his life. That's not what a hallucination is. These things are produced necessarily by a massive combination of things, and they are kind of just like everything else we see, just slightly different. So this is the paragraph I really wanted to spend time on because this is 331, right? Yes, good. Can Deleuze and Guattari be seen as a Marx and Engels duo? No. I would have to understand what that means. I don't think so, though. That seems like trying to create a metaphorical relationship between them, which I'm not sure I'm down with. So yeah, the view of death is very, very different than the way they're talking about it, because it's built in. There's a saying, I used it last time, it's Raymond Smullyan, who's one of my favorite logicians, and his buddy Sal Gorn asked him, Raymond, how are you so relaxed? We're getting older, aren't you terrified of death? And he said, why should I be worried about death? It's not going to happen in my lifetime. Which is not just a clever statement, but accurate. In that sense, it's the way that death operates. What death is the becoming ceasing. The consistent small deaths that are happening constantly in all of the intensities become what they are, and they become totalized and completed. There's no longer a becoming as part of it. There's no changing. There's no shifting and that oscillating. And that's the back and forth we're about to get into. It's not really about switching, as they say here, from one aspect to another. It's not at all a personal deepening, but something different. There was a return from the experience of death to the model of death in the cycle of the desiring machines. The cycle is closed. for a new departure, since this I is another, the experience of death must have given us exactly enough broadened experience in order to live and know that the desiring machines do not die, that the subject as an adjacent part is always a one who conducts the experience, not an I who receives the model. For the model itself is not the I either, but the body without organs. The I does not rejoin the model without the model starting out again in the direction of another experience, always going from model to experience and starting out again. Returning from the model to the experience is what schizophrenizing death amounts to. This is the exercise of the desiring machines, and they're very secret, well understood by the authors of horror. It's a fantastic way to describe it. The machine tells us this, makes us live it, feel it, deeper than delirium, further than hallucination. Yes, the return to repulsion will condition other attractions, other functionings, the setting in motion of other working parts on the BWO, the putting to work of other adjacent parts on the periphery that have as much a right to say one as we ourselves do. Let him die in his leaping through unheard of and unnameable things. Other horrible workers will come. They will begin on the horizons where the others collapsed. The eternal return as experience and as the deterritorialized circuit of all the cycles of desire. This is for Deleuze, and he wrote about it again in Nietzschean philosophy. He writes about it a lot. This is how he sees, and this is the vicious circle from Klossowski. This is vicious circle from Klossowski. Read it. It's straight up that, but it's put slightly differently and in a very different direction, which is, I think, something that helps. But it is this process. They say, again, just to reread it, always going from the model to the experience, and starting out again, returning from the model to the experience, is what schizophrenizing death amounts to, the exercise of the desiring machines. This is the death drive, but they've broken it apart. It's not really a death drive. It isn't a drive towards death. It's the way that death is built into the very nature of desiring machines, as much as life is built into it. But they haven't talked about the life drive. That's not really the setup. They're talking about desire. They're talking about the connecting process of desire. And that thing that it's in contrast with is not really the BWO. It's not fighting the BWO. It's fighting the totalized organization, the actualized organization as a whole. So is the BWO. That neither of them want that. Neither of them are driving to that. They're repulsed by it. And that process of, oh, this thing's totalized, back we go, boop, boop, back we go. This is the thing where there is always a push towards a shift towards something. This is the process of the eternal return as experience, as he says. And I really, really love this shit. Well, convenience, so it's not going to help you understand ER directly. He talks about it in there, and then it's going to be Klossowski. Let me see if I can just pop that into the Discord. 2 seconds, because it's Nietzsche, the vicious circle. All right, where are you? QC, there you are. If you join the QC, we have a huge library of shit. I tossed it in the chat in the QC. And it's, yeah, there's a video game called Eternal Return. I almost used it in my last project. Yeah, it's a whole thing. It's a good name. It's a fucking cool name. But for here, the Eternal Return as experience, this is what that I go experience. This is what that experience is. I go experience. This is what that experience is. The back and forth, the cycle of this is the thing they're pushing. This is the pulsing way desire operates and why death is a part of it. And why we make the mistake of thinking death as a transcendent element is part of it, because death is a part of every inch of it, every single contraction of desire. Death is there just as much as life is there. But there is no transcendent death, not in that sense. Not really. Because it's just about when we stop dying, basically. Because once we stop dying, that's the end. There's no more. There's no more experience. There's no thing to go back to. There's no more repulsion. And repulsion's even a part of it. These things just go away. and it shifts all of it. Shifts all of it. I've read a small amount of Quine. It's not 100% for me. And yes, I did, Shakespeare. We may get to that today if we have time. I'm not sure. Probably not. Shakespeare was asking the other day, I think they saw me go on a pretty hard rant about one of the things that makes me nuts when we talk about genocide or war crimes or anything, that people who are accused or defending people who are accused tend to act like we have no model for what to go after, or we've never prosecuted things, or that we've never seen this before on a large scale. And we have, not just the Holocaust in Germany, but even more recently, and 10, 15 years ago, with everything that happened in Rwanda. And it was a few years ago, I ended up taking a pretty deep dive into all of that for personal reasons and other reasons. And I had a morbid curiosity about it mixed with a sort of, I don't know, confused side that I was always wondering why people didn't learn more. And I had the idea in my head that, well, it's because people are silly, and I wanted to sort of invalidate that. And I ended up doing the opposite. For sure. Because the Rwanda story is basically, really, really depressing. And then also comes out the other side with sort of really weird, I don't want to say, like, hope is the wrong word, but it's a very interesting overall story that I think is worth people knowing. But we don't want to do that. There's only ever one genocide. We're not allowed to talk about any others. Right? Ever. That's not how it works. So what can I say? So probably get to that another stream. It's not going to be today. Yeah. Sorry, that just depressed the shit out of me.
That's very dark stream.
Oh, that Rwanda stream was it would be very, very dark. Work on Rwanda, the report that was made post-reconciliation. I would just read the report. Books on it are decent, and there are some decent movies or documentaries, but the actual report, I think, because it is on the dry side, it is more intended for academia or for trials and for how we move forward as a people is kind of the mentality. That gives you, I think, a view into the most blunt, realistic way that things happened, and the depth of it, because there's stuff people don't want to talk about when they make movies or they do other things, because they're just it's like when you start reading about, like, when you're younger and you're like, oh, World War II, wow. And like, you're like 10 and you're like tanks and guns and all of that. And then you start reading more and you get to the point where you start learning about the death camps and you're like, what the fuck? And then you start reading more, and it's somehow you don't hit the bottom of humanity, or you start losing the sight of the bottom of humanity. And then you learn about what China did, or Japan did to China. And you fall further. And this is kind of like that, where I don't think it's necessary that I would say that suffering is greater or lesser. Humanity suffers in a lot of different ways. But the creativity of the horrors in Rwanda gave me pause. And I think it's worth knowing them. And they give you pause because it's the kind of thing where it's like, it's too much to put into a movie. 2021 report. It's just, I mentioned on the last stream, they literally formed rape brigades of AIDS patients that they released from hospitals in order to infect women from the opposite side. Like, and children. And I'm just like, that's the level of like multifaceted horror that is that statement. And that's the stuff that I feel comfortable saying. Like, the extreme parts of humanity I find fascinating. It's a George Carlin line where he says, extreme human behavior is the most interesting thing. And I tend to agree with him. because it always surprises me what a body can do. And this would be examples of that. Rwanda is next level. Rwanda's next level. And I know there's worse things done elsewhere in various ways. Rwanda seems to have many, many, many of the worst things I've ever seen. It's a lot. I'm going to try not to depress myself. It's really hard to pull yourself out of it. I don't necessarily recommend getting into it if you're wanting to have a good day. That would not be on the top of my list of things. That's for sure. I would definitely not. To come back to this, Nietzsche and the Vicious Circle, which is Klossowski's book on Nietzsche and the Eternal Return. The English version happens to be translated by Dan Smith. So just saying, we're talking about some pretty good shit as far as I'm concerned there. Daniel Smith is fantastic. He not only understands these people, he has a very good understanding of kind of what they're going for, how they're going for it, and the very, very deep complexity of what they're playing with. It's a thing that is often lost a lot in most of these translations, to say the least. And Klossowski especially. Klossowski, Bergson, Deleuze suffers from it, but a little bit less because he's more well-known. These lesser-known thinkers who are deeply important, unless you have someone, and you're fortunate enough to have someone who really cares, you'll get very strange translations. We're fortunate in the case of, for example, Raymond Rouet. Translations from some of these thinkers tend to be people like Daniel Smith, or I know that Lapujade is starting to do a lot more English translations, which is great. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge. But anyway, this is where we kind of left off last week. And that's what I kind of wanted to focus on, is re-talking through the experience of death and how it operates in here. Because the thing they're driving away from is away from the idea of a death drive. This is kind of what they're pointing at. The idea of death being the center of psychoanalytic thought, or that there is a single death drive or a single passion drive. I want a thing. Lacan does away with, again, traditional psychoanalysis doesn't do that, but popularly that's how it's talked about. And with death, traditional psychoanalysis does say there is a death drive. And this instead looking at death not as something that is a drive towards a thing. Oh, he did this because of the death drive. But because that's symbolic. Again, we're trying to move back towards these indices and the balancing of them and how they sort of are pushing and where they're pushing. And it's important to understand the process of how these elements are built, how we have these sort of how the parts of experience that are brought in and the intensities generated from them necessitate within a consistent and sort of impassioned death that is wrapped in passion. And then at the same time, a passion pulls back, is wrapped in death, and then back and forth, and this oscillation. Because again, this oscillation is not the totality of the person. This is one part of it, as they talk about, and they say elsewhere in what we read, and they're saying in this is not just that we have a subject. It's the subject as an adjacent part, always a one who conducts the experience, not an I who receives the model. Because the model is not the I either. I does not rejoin the model without the model starting out again. This consistent sort of movement of all of these things. There's a couple versions of you and where you're at and how that happens. It's not that you become a subject on the BWO, even though I know it sounds like that in a few sentences in 1,000 Plateaus. It's instead how one understands the BWO, how the BWO can become an enabling place of possibility, and that there is many ones who are sort of doing these things. So the one conducting, not the I who receives. These are not the same subjects, and that's a big push for them to sort of keep driving at and driving at and driving at. It's a lot. Generally, though. Does that make sense? Huh?
We assume that the theoretical subject is already kind of like not there or diffused, or I don't know. We assume that like it's not a subject, it's not an I, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a Hegelian I, it's not a Kantian I, because it's presumption of an axiomatic and an order based, right? I guess.
Yes. But we'll just do the next paragraph, because the thing that they're driving at, again, the idea of a death drive, right, is kind of funny to them at this point, because again, a drive at all is kind of funny. It's you having a drive is like, no, you're made up of an infinite number of these connective desire partial objects that in themselves all create almost molecular death, that are constantly dying. And you should be glad that you're constantly dying, because the last thing you want is to stop dying, because then you're really dead, is kind of the point. That's kind of the thing. And there's no callers, as I'm in Discord. I tend to sit in Discord live, and people can shout. And that was our lovely friend Marcellus Wallace. And I'm sure you'll hear others. But to continue a little bit forward, how does this contend with Nietzsche's Eternal Return? For Nietzsche, the Eternal Return has a lot of different sort of directions. Klossowski takes it very, very much in this direction. Actually, let me see. Please go ahead. Or maybe that was an accident. That's fine too. 2 seconds. Let me see if I can actually find a good quote from Le Cercle Vicieux. 2 seconds, sorry. Going up to... we're going to do a little bit of some Klossowski now. Give me 2 seconds. Let's see. Will UPDF do this correctly? It probably won't, because Discord has been funky lately. Let's see if I can make this a bit larger. No, this sucks. 2 seconds. Let me see if I can switch the program here. We'll do this. Yeah, we'll do it like this. And then I'll switch this to being... Where did that go? Why isn't that showing up? It's okay. Let's do game capture and existing. Do it. Good. There, that is that. Perfect. All right, let's see if this works a little bit better. I don't know if it will, but we'll find out very shortly. Stop snapping, Windows. God damn, Windows, you suck. Input, pixel size, fit perfectly. Nope, try it, come on. Oh, this might actually work. This might make my day. Nice little free program I grabbed on YouTube. If anyone else streams, great little Steam program called Shader Glass that literally is just what it sounds like. It's a little glass element that you can put on your screen, and then you can actually capture just that. And it captures exactly the right size and upscales. It's kind of fascinating. So I can do things like this, which I think looks kind of nice, actually. Yeah, it's lovely. And I'll just get rid of UPDF in the background. Yeah, Oh, God, it lets me select text through, too. That's fantastic. Okay. We're going to read a little bit of Klossowski and Vicious Circle, which is about Nietzsche. So this is from the Experience of the Eternal Return, which is a little bit further in. And we're just going to kind of work our way through. He opens by talking through, as Klossowski's tends to want to do, Deleuze does this too, is a little bit of biography and background. And then, again, much more conversational. Deleuze and Guattari tend to be a little bit more academic in how they write things. So we're going to be getting through here, but then we're going to make a digression. You'll see kind of how his writing works. So we'll start with forgetting and anamnesis in the lived experience of the eternal return of the same. The thought of the eternal return of the same came to Nietzsche as an abrupt awakening in the midst of a Stimmung, a certain tonality of the soul. Initially confused with this Stimmung, it gradually emerged as a thought nonetheless. It preserved the character of the revelation as a sudden unveiling. The ecstatic character of this experience must be distinguished from the notion of the universal ring that already haunted Nietzsche during the Hellenic period of his youth. It's a very particular phrasing that he's using here when he's talking about this, and it's kind of super, super important. The idea of the eternal return came to him. It arrived, but not like a lightning bolt. It's not the setup. It was an abrupt awakening, but it wasn't what it was quite yet. Not really. There was a sudden unveiling of a thing. But what is the function of forgetting in this revelation? This is a big deal to Klossowski. More specifically, is not forgetting the source as well as the indispensable condition not only for the revelation of the eternal return, but also for the sudden transformation of the identity of the person to whom it is revealed? Forgetting thus conceals eternal becoming and the absorption of all identities in being. Is there not an antinomy implicit in Nietzsche's lived experience between the revealed content and the teaching of this content as an ethical doctrine in the formula, act as though you had to relive your life innumerable times and will to relive it innumerable times, for in one way or another you must recommence and relive it. The imperative proposition supplements the necessary forgetting by invoking the will to power. The second proposition foresees the necessary. Sorry, I didn't realize I didn't move it. The imperative proposition supplements the necessary forgetting by invoking the will to power. The second proposition foresees the necessity concealed in this forgetting. Let's go back again. Nietzsche says, act as though you had to relive your life innumerable times, and will to relive it innumerable times, for in one way or another, you must recommence and relive it. One way or another is the big phrasing there. So, the imperative position is the necessity of forgetting by invoking the will. The second is the necessity concealed in forgetting. Anamnesis coincides with the revelation of the return. How could the return not bring back forgetfulness? Not only do I learn that I have been brought back to the crucial moment to which the eternity of the circle culminates, the moment in which the truth of its necessary return is revealed to me, but at the same time, I learn that I was other than I am now, for having forgotten this truth, and thus that I have become another by learning it. Will I change again, and once more forget that I will necessarily change during an eternity until I relearn this revelation anew? When we speak of, in the eternal return, as when he speaks of this is the amnesis that he's talking about. Think of the unconscious as they're describing it as the model of death on one side, and on the other side, experience. The model is what happened. The model is how you define it, what happened. The second step is experience. Then you return to the model, but then you return to experience. You move back and forth. Not only do I learn that I have been brought back to the crucial moment in which the eternity of the circle culminates, back to the model, the moment in which the truth of its necessary return is revealed to me. The model has to be there. It is always part of it. But at the same time, I learn that I was other than I am now. I was not the person I was when the model was created. I now am someone who sees the model. This necessarily changes me. And I was other than I am now for having forgotten this truth. And thus I have become another by learning it. Will I change again, once more forget that I will necessarily change again during an eternity until I relearn this revelation anew? Klossowski's fucking good writer. Like, insanely fucking good writer. I mean, I don't even know if I could even explain it better than that. It's so fucking poetically put. We'll continue and we'll come back to this because, again, this is one of my favorite books. The emphasis must be placed on the loss of a given identity, the death of the identity. The loss must be placed on that. The death of God, the God who guarantees the identity of the responsible self, opens up the soul to all its possible identities. This is the BWO, already apprehended in the various Stimmungen, I'm not pronouncing it right, I don't care, of the Nietzschean soul. The revelation of the eternal return brings about, as necessary, the successive realizations of all possible identities. At bottom, every name of history is I. In the end, Dionysus and the crucified. In Nietzsche, the death of God corresponds to the Stimmung in the same way as the ecstatic moment of the eternal return. I love it. Sorry, I just really fucking love this a lot. Like a huge amount. Like a gigantic fucking amount. Fucking love this so much. For Nietzsche, the eternal return is not just the fact that things are cyclical. There's a weird thing that happens when you become aware of the cycle. The demon that shows up and says, hey, would you do this day again? The awareness that you're going to do the day again changes how you behave. It changes what you do. Not necessarily because of any direction, but the awareness of the thing. That return to the model being the thing, shifts then what desire will do. And this is not happening at a personal level. We can experience this personally, but it's happening beneath that. This is what is happening in the core of desiring production. The eternal return is within desiring production itself, in the very space of the experience of things falling back on the model, moving back to experience. Because the model is the thing that we keep coming back to, but the model itself, by existing and by being experienced, gives us a different push. It gives us a different reaction. It gives us a different view of things. The only thing that they both hate is the flat organization, because there is really no flat organization. There is no organized subject. The organism, it's not really a thing. They're constantly fighting against this very idea. The model of death is heat death. The model of life is this continuous shifting. There is no in between Brooks being alive. That's a stability and alive. No, a stability is death. So this push, returning to death, returning back and forth is not between life and death. It's between the constant becoming of things. And that's the second bit he says here. The emphasis placed on the loss of a given identity. Hi, I'm thirsty. Well, Thirsty Brooks is dead. The death of God, the God who guarantees the identity of the responsible self, opens up the soul to all the possible identities. The death of God opens up the soul to all possibilities. The BWO as a space of the potentiality. The death of that identity, the death of that God, gives all potentials out there. It opens up all of that. It opens up everything. The revelation of the eternal return brings about as necessity the successive realizations of all possible identities. At bottom, every name of history is I. In the end, Dionysus and the crucified, it's Nietzschean terms. In Nietzsche, the death of God corresponds to a Stimmung in the same way as does the ecstatic moment of the eternal return. Now for the digression. The eternal return is a necessity that must be willed. Only he who I am now can will the necessity of my return and all the events that have led to what I am, insofar as the will here presupposes a subject. Now this subject is no longer able to will itself as it has been up to now, but wills all prior possibilities. For by embracing in a single glance the necessity of the return as a universal law, I deactualize my present self in order to will myself in all the other selves whose entire series must be passed through, so that in accordance with the circular movement, I once again become what I am at the moment I discover the law of the eternal return. Klossowski's writing, again, this is Smith's translation. Klossowski's writing in French is this beautiful, but Smith fucking nails it and he brings it to life. So it's such a fucking good translation. I just am. I have no critiques about this one. I have 2 copies of the French, and I have no critiques. I like reading it in French because there's a lyrical quality that I don't know if English carries over, but Smith does such a good job with his translation. It's so, the BWO, when we talk about it, it is the model of death. But wait, the model of death? That seems to be bad. That would be a stuck totality, the model of death. No. It is our model for death. Death that is the ending of things, the finishing, the closing. But it is the process in which death enables the potentiality. It is why the potentiality is there. The dying of Thirsty Brooks enables all the other Brookses to be able to be there, and even people who aren't named Brooks or any of those things. It wills all of those. The eternal return is necessary, and it must be willed. This is the base of it. Only he who I am now can will the necessity of my return and all the events that have led to what I am, insofar as the will here presupposes a subject. Now this subject is no longer able to will itself as it has been up to now, but wills all prior possibilities. Move forward a little bit. Let me see if I can make this larger so that way I can read it easier. That'll make it so much easier. Perfect. I'll extend you out. What a great little program. Fuck, this is crazy. Wish I had found this sooner. This is going to save me so much headache. This is going to, so much nicer. There. Perfect. At the moment, and again, the eternal return conceptually here, as Klossowski's talking about it, is the awareness of the model. And again, this is very much, if you read ATP, very much the stuff that they're talking about there. It's the awareness of the model. Shifts things. That this is the process that everyone and everything is going through. But, and Nietzsche talks about this, people who are not talked to about the idea of the eternal return, you don't have that moment of realizing, actually, I only have so many days left. Memento mori. Someday I will die. The knowledge of that, whatever it is. I will be repeating these behaviors. This is who I am. Is this who I want to leave behind? It's kind of like stage 1. Stage 2 is understanding that every action is kind of this consistent repetition, that actually the now that exists is you repeating various actions and creating the stability of you moving through that. Stage 2, stage 3 is kind of the realization that every action is actually a direct repetition and a return to the same. And there's a weird moment of it. He calls it revelatory for a reason. And it's really odd when it's revealed. At the moment the eternal return is revealed to me, I cease to be myself hit at nunc, and am susceptible to becoming innumerable others, knowing I shall forget this revelation once I am outside the memory of myself. This forgetting forms the object of my present willing, for such a forgetting would amount to a memory outside my own limits. My present consciousness will be established only in the forgetting of my other possible identities. every moment is a pulsing of all these things. It's desiring production, whatever you want to refer to. It's this moment of pulsing back and forth that all of these organized elements are going at it, pushing to it. And there's a moment of revelation as you sort of sit beside it, still produced by it, but it hits, the eternal return hits you. And instead of simply allowing, instead of simply going with it, it becomes clear that you can change that. It becomes clear that there's a shifting you can make. A little bit, sure, but you can, all these other possibilities that could be the next moment. The next thing. Again, we're not talking about choice here. It's not the thing, but there is innumerable others, susceptible to becoming innumerable others. You become aware more of the drives, the pushes, as you sit outside of that and think for a moment. But that moment, you don't keep. You're not aware of yourself all the time. That's not how it works. That self-awareness, that monitoring of oneself, that return to self that happens, it isn't where you live. You couldn't possibly do anything. Living in that moment would be catatonia, would be death. The bouncing back and forth is the whole point. The model, oh shit, I'm aware, and then off I am doing other things. This back and forth, the forgetting is the big deal, because you will forget the revelation you're having. If you're having it now, if you've had this before, you will lose it. It will be gone. And once you're outside that memory of yourself, it is gone. This forgetting forms the object of my present willing, the willing forth. For such a forgetting would amount to a memory outside my own limits. My present consciousness will be established only in the forgetting of my other possible identities. There's a little humor here, and very intentionally through this. There's a little, I find it more humorous. What is this memory, the memory of self? Is it the necessary circular movement to which I abandon myself, fleeing myself from myself? If I now admit to this willing, and by willing it necessary, I have re-willed it, I will simply have made my consciousness conform to this circular movement. Were I to identify myself with the circle, I would never emerge from this representation as myself. In fact, already, I am no longer in the moment when the abrupt revelation of the eternal return reached me. For this revelation to have meaning, I would have to lose consciousness of myself, and the circular movement of the return would have to be merged with my consciousness, my unconsciousness, until the movement brings me back to the moment when the necessity of passing through the entire series of my possibilities was revealed to me. All that remains then is for me to re-will myself. No longer is the outcome of these prior possibilities, no longer is one realization among thousands, but as a fortuitous moment, whose very fortuity implies the necessity of the integral return of the whole series. Fantastic. Did Deleuze have a series of ethics? No. I would say he sidestepped the very idea for most of his work. I would say almost all of it, actually. It's just like they open and they talk throughout. I mean, chapter 4, they talk in Anti-Oedipus about how they do not prescribe a political project. That's not what they're doing. It's kind of important. Most people don't remember that. That's okay. That's kind of a big deal. To me, at least, I think. I think we keep going. I really like... Does everyone here like Klossowski? I like my Klossowski. I like my Klossowski. I'll change the stream title because we're just going to be doing some... Yeah. Yeah, I see what's happening. I think if we were to talk about an ethical project, and if there is an ethics that they end up with, and I think you could probably derive and play with some sort of conception of it, that for Deleuze, it is things are about creating the new. Everything is about creating the new. And that's his drive. For Guattari, it is about fighting the repression of the unconscious, more or less. That's, if there is like an ethical need or push, it's towards those things. But it would be really tough to sort of say that it is their ethical push, I think I would phrase. But to continue from here. But to re-will oneself as a fortuitous moment is to renounce being oneself once and for all. For it is not once and for all that I had renounced being myself and had to will this renunciation. Fucking love it. And I am not even this fortuitous moment once and for all, so long as I have to re-will this moment one more time. For nothing. For myself. Nothing here is the circle once and for all. It is a sign for everything that has happened, for everything that is happening, and for everything that ever will happen in the world. So the question comes, how can willing intervene without forgetting what must now be re-willed? Yeah, I'm going to be doing a reading of Living Currency, and I've got to do Klossowski. Like, this is just too lyrical to not make it a serious reading. It's so good. It's so good. God damn, it's so good. But it's like so dense. I literally could stop at any one of these paragraphs and we could like start discussing forever and never stop because it's so fucking good. Living Currency is like an incredibly short book that's wildly dense for what it is, because it's basically a complete evolution of Marx. Again, that some philosophers may take and run with and then not actually give full credit to. But wait, hey, what am I saying? Why would I say that? So the question, how can willing intervene? How can I will to intervene? But also, like, I forget what must now be re-willed. Like, it's fucked up. What? For in fact, this very moment, and again, you can literally apply this right now to your existence. In this very moment, in which the necessity of the circular movement was revealed to me, appears in my life as having never taken place beforehand. The Hohostimung, that can't be correct. That's fantastic. The Hohostimung, not pronouncing that right, don't care. The high tonality of my soul was required in order for me to know and feel the necessity that all things return. If I meditate on this high tonality in which the circle is suddenly reflected, and if I accept it, no longer as a personal obsession, but as the only valid apprehension of being, as the sole reality, I will see that it is impossible for it to have not already appeared to me innumerable times, perhaps in other forms, but I had forgotten it, because it is inscribed in the very essence of the circular movement, which I necessarily forget from one state to the next, so that I can reach another state and be thrown outside of myself, even at the risk of everything coming to a stop. And even when I will not have forgotten that I had been precipitated outside myself in this life, I nevertheless had forgotten that I was thrown outside myself in another life, one in no way different from this life. I really like it a lot. I really like it a lot. Jesus. Because it's this weird thing. You're aware of this cycle. We all kind of are, especially if we've had it. There's no falling away from it. There's no hiding from it. It's not really how it works. It's not that. It's just the forgetting. It goes away. And somehow comes back, and then we're aware that we've also experienced it before. And the sort of consistency of that sort of, I don't know, joke of life continues. My son has talked about this. This is a thing kids talk about. This is the nature of the fucking mirror stage. When you start understanding that you're the one doing the thing, or that you exist, just the idea that you exist, and the focus and the idea that you exist. You don't have that with you all the time. Thoughts are evoked of the world, just as is this. It's willed, but it's willed from interactions in the world as well. There's no separation. There's no me to other things. The world produces this, and it produces it over and over and wills it back. And it's this really odd thing that we have this moment. It's revealed, and it appears as though we've never had it before. You have that feeling of like, oh my God, there's a high tonality of the soul. There's a revelation, would be another word for it. And it's required for me to know and feel the necessity that all things do return. If I meditate on this, in which the circle becomes reflected, and if I accept it no longer as a personal obsession, but as the only valid apprehension of being, the sole reality, I will see it as impossible for it to not already have appeared to me innumerable times, perhaps in other forms, but I've forgotten it, because it is inscribed in the very essence of circular movement, which I necessarily forget from one state to the next, so that I can reach another state and be thrown outside of myself. Beautiful fucking language. Stunning language. At the risk of everything coming to a stop. At the risk of everything coming to a stop, is this to say that the movement was stopped at the moment of the sudden revelation? No. Far from it. The movement was not stopped, for I myself, Nietzsche, was unable to escape it. This revelation did not come to me as reminiscence, nor as an experience of déjà vu. Everything would stop for me if I remembered a previous identical revelation. Even if I were to continually proclaim the necessity of the return, for it would serve to keep me within myself, and thus outside the truth that I am teaching. It was therefore necessary for me to forget this revelation in order for it to be true. Within the series that I suddenly glimpse, the series that I must live through in order to be brought back to the same point, the revelation of the eternal return of the same implies that the same revelation could just as well have occurred at any other moment of the circular movement. Indeed, it must be thus. For in order to receive this revelation, I am nothing except this capacity to receive this revelation at all the other moments of the circular movement. Nowhere in particular for me alone, but always in the movement as a whole. Nietzsche speaks of the eternal return as the same as the supreme thought, but also the supreme feeling as the highest feeling. I fucking love this so very much. What's up, aerobics? Oh, nothing. Excellent. You can also type. You don't have to always speak. It's okay if you got a question or a thing. I'm a sucker for all of this. It's incredibly evocative of things to me. It clicks for me for personal experience. It clicks for me through the way I understood some things, and it hits me in really powerful ways. I find Klossowski's writing to be stunning. Again, very much could be personal, could be not. I have no idea what your experience is going to be, but it hits me like crazy square in the face. Like, just like, oh, that's that thing. I know this. And so when Klossowski says, he goes on, in my unpublished note contemporaneous with the gay science, he writes, Nietzsche writes, my doctrine teaches, live in such a way that you must desire to live again. This is your duty. You will live again in any case. He for whom striving procures the highest feeling, let him strive. He for whom repose procures the highest feeling, let him rest. He for whom belonging, following, and obeying procures the highest feeling, let him obey, provided that he becomes aware of what procures the highest feeling, and that he shrinks back from nothing. Eternity depends upon it. Back to Klossowski. Earlier, he had noted that present humanity no longer knows how to wait, as nature is endowed with an eternal soul fit for an eternal becoming and a future amelioration are able to do. Here, the emphasis is placed less on willing than on desire and necessity. And this desire and this necessity are themselves linked to eternity, whence the reference to the highest feeling, or in Nietzschean terms, to Hohe Stimmung, the highest tonality of the soul. I fucking love it. I love it. It's good stuff. It's very good. It's very good. I have a spider climbing on my monitor, but I also have bug problems, so maybe I'll leave them be. We have a weird, it's been a weird spring. We have a lot of weird bugs, more than I like. Jordan, if I need to live in a way I would want to repeat, is it okay to ignore Trump, war, and other delightful things? That would be, well, I mean, I think if I were Nietzsche, and again, I don't think I would answer directly as Nietzsche would, but he's very clear here. If obedience is what gives you that highest feeling, find the thing that gives you the highest feeling. Find the thing that does that. Live in a way that you desire to live again. This is your duty. What is the thing that produces that highest feeling that you must feel again, that you must go for again? This is the thing to strive for. And if it's sitting around and fucking playing video games and working a 9 to 5 or working 2 jobs and you actually get something out of it, don't allow the judgment of weird society to go, oh, fuck, I do this. I know people who are actually quite, I don't want to say content. They even enjoy it. And then they go home and they play video games and they have a fun time. Like, good for you. It ain't for me. For him, it's a question of what is driving that highest feeling, the will and the will to repetition of that. How can you get back to that? Become aware of what you procures the highest feeling and shrink back from nothing. Forgetting Trump, for me, doesn't procure the highest feeling, but also sitting on it and feeling like shit and repeating it doesn't procure the highest feeling. There are days where, how I dealt with depressing things in the past is often going and working soup kitchens or food pantries and things like that helped. I've found building things often does as well. What's the thing that gives you the desire to get up, to go do? And it's not about, is it okay to ignore Trump? It's for Nietzsche, like that. Who cares? Fuck Trump. Like, do your thing and keep doing your thing and don't allow anyone to stop that. And then you start seeing how it kind of collides with naturally what Trump is doing. So do the thing that then enables that and find the contingent reality of what produces this feeling and this highest feeling in you. It's contingent continuously. There's no transcendent thing to do. It's contingent and it's also dependent on you. And I don't know you. So maybe ignore Trump. I don't know. Probably not. I would guess not, given the question. But hey, I don't want to psychologize. But that's Klossowski. And there's some really, really great bits in here. But again, this is why the play of the return and how they're playing with it now and how they're working with it, this is very much where they're playing with it. The emphasis must be placed on the loss of a given identity. This is it. The emphasis must be placed on the loss of a given identity. The death of God, the God who guarantees the identity of the responsible self, opens up the soul to all possible identities, already apprehended in the various Stimmungen of the Nietzschean soul. The revelation of the eternal return brings about as necessity the successive realizations of all possible identities. So if we go back, just pop back over to our friends at AO. This is the returning from the model to experience and back again. This is that phrasing right at the top here. The experience of death must have given us exactly enough broadened experience in order to live and know that the desiring machines do not die, and that the subject as an adjacent part is always one who conducts the experience, not an I who receives the model. For the model itself is not the I either, but the body without organs, the model for death. And I does not rejoin the model without the model starting out again in the direction of another experience. Feel the flow? Feel the flow? Feel the flow? Feel the flow? It's a good flow. So to Nietzsche, if your thing is engaging with unhealthy behaviors, that's fine. Well, then they're not unhealthy. I mean, again, this is a question of like, it's more than just, I'm having a good time. That's not the thing that he's talking about here. All right, you're going to make me read more. You motherfuckers, we're going to go back. You sons of bitches. You're going to make me read more. Every time. Come on, there you go. Down we go, down we go. Let's talk about that. I'm going to end up moving this around a little bit more, so apologies if there's any motion sickness. We're starting right here. How can a tonality of the soul become a thought? And how can the highest feeling is what he's driving at. Highest feeling. How can the tonality of the soul, a Stimmung, become the thought? How can the highest feeling, the Höchstgefühl, namely the eternal return, become the supreme thought? Oh, it's at the bottom. This is not footnotes. It looks like footnotes to me. I was wrong. 1. The tonality of the soul is a fluctuation of intensity. You'll start to see a lot of where D&G got shit for Anti-Oedipus really fast here. In order for it to become communicable, the intensity must take itself as object and thus turn back on itself. 3. In turning back on itself, the intensity interprets itself. But how can it interpret itself? By becoming a counterweight to itself. For this, the intensity must divide, separate from itself, and come back together. Now this is what happens to the intensity in what could be called moments of rise and fall. However, it is always the same fluctuation. A wave, by the way, fluctuation, not flow. It's always the same fluctuation. A wave, in one concrete sense, we might note in passing the importance of the spectacle of sea waves in Nietzsche's Contemplations. 4. But does an interpretation presuppose the search for a signification? Rise and fall, these are designations, nothing else. Is there any signification beyond this observation of rise and fall? Intensity never has any meaning other than that of being an intensity. In itself, the intensity seems to have no meaning. What is a meaning? How can it be constituted? What is the agent of meaning? Again, this is fucking AO. This is fucking, it's just, man, they did Klossowski wrong. The intensities don't themselves have signification, don't apply symbols to them or meaning to them in that way. That's not really what they do. They're designations of intensities. They're, you might say, indices of intensity. You might say that. Intensity has no meaning other than that of being intensive. It's intensive. In itself, the intensity has no meaning. What is meaning? How can it be constituted? The agent of meaning, and thus of signification, once again, seems to be the intensity, depending on its various fluctuations, its various flux. If intensity by itself has no meaning, other than that of being an intensity, how can it be the agent of signification or be signified as this or that tonality of the soul? We asked above how it could interpret itself. We answered that in its risings and fallings, it had to act as counterweight. But this was nothing more than a simple observation. How then does it acquire meaning? And how is meaning constituted in intensity? Precisely by turning back on itself, even in a new fluctuation. By turning back on itself, by repeating and, as it were, imitating itself, it becomes a sign. Okay? But a sign is first of all the trace of a fluctuation of intensity, a flux, you might say. If a sign retains its meaning, it is because the degree of intensity coincides with it. It signifies only through a new afflux of intensity, which in a certain manner joins up with its first trace. But a sign is not only the trace of a fluctuation. It can also mark an absence of intensity. Do you recognize this from what we literally just read? A sign is not only a trace of fluctuation, it can also mark an absence of intensity. And here too, a new afflux is necessary, if only to signify this absence. Literally, I'm reading to you the part that they were quoting from Klossowski. If you haven't noticed yet. If you haven't noticed, I'm literally reading the part. Oh, no, don't feel bad, Spike. That literally what you're asking, we haven't engaged with this book beyond today. If we go back to the reading. Do you remember this conversation that they're having, and we're talking about our friends here? Right? This. And they have this other little part where they say, as Klossowski noted, an afflux is necessary merely to signify the absence of intensity. See that right in the middle? Right in the middle, as Klossowski noted. See that, as Klossowski noted? I'm literally reading to you what inspired this part. Literally going through that. Because this is it. This is where we're talking about the way that the intensive becomes a sign, becomes signifying. How it works like this. Because, ultimately, this fluctuation of intensity, if a sign retains meaning, it's because the degree of intensity coincides with it. It signifies only through a new afflux of intensity, which in a certain manner joins up the first trace. But a sign is not only the trace of a fluctuation. It can also mark the absence of intensity. And here too, a new afflux, a new burst forth of this is necessary, if only to signify the absence. Whether we name this afflux attention, will, memory, and whether we name this reflux, indifference, relaxation, or forgetting, it is always a question of the same intensity, no different from the moving waves of the incoming tide. You and I, Nietzsche said to them, we are of the same origin, the same race. The flux and this reflux will intermingle, fluctuation within fluctuation, like the figures that rise to the crest of a wave, leaving behind them only foamy froth. Such are the designations through which the intensity signifies itself, and this is what we call thought. But if in natures as apparently limited and closed as our own, there still exists something open enough to make Nietzsche invoke the movement of waves, it is because, notwithstanding the sign in which the fluctuation of intensity culminates, the signification, because it exists only through an afflux, can never completely disengage itself from the moving chasms it masks. Every signification remains a function of chaos out of which meaning is generated. I fucking adore this book so much. That is chapter 1 of Anti-Oedipus and chapter 4:3 and 4:4. Like, this is incredibly well put, and stating all of that, it's built into it as he's talking. This incredible language this is Klossowski. This is Klossowski at his best. And I say that not saying the other works are not amazing, but this is like, it's magical. And you can see, if you've read through Anti-Oedipus once, you can see literally where Deleuze got a lot of his shit for it. A lot. Because this to me is like what Deleuze required Guattari for, and what Guattari required Deleuze for, Klossowski had. That's this. Desire as the flux and reflux and afflux and the Nietzschean will. But he even says, it doesn't matter, we call it whatever. It's always the same question. It's always a question of the same intensity, no different from the moving waves of a tide. You and I, we are of the same origin, the same race. This flux, this reflux intermingles, fluctuation within fluctuation, like figures that rise to the crest of a wave, leaving behind them only foamy froth. These are the designations through which intensity signifies itself, and this is what we call thought. This is thought. Right now, what you're doing. This is how it came about. You're doing this. This is your process. That's it. But if, in nature's limited and closed as our own, there still exists something open enough to make Nietzsche invoke the movement of waves, it's because, notwithstanding the sign in which the fluctuation of intensity culminates, this fluctuation of intensity culminates in a sign, it's not the sign, signification, because it exists only through an afflux, the afflux of nothing, of a missing piece, of a non-intensity. Signification has these elements that are the waves, the chasms. The signification is all of that. It's not the sign in which fluctuation culminates. It's the signification that covers over all of this and that actually doesn't disengage itself from the chasms, the zero intensities it masks. Every signification is a function of chaos necessarily, and from here meaning is generated. This is Deleuze. This is Deleuze across the board. It's a little weird to read. Again, I love Deleuze. I think he does a lot of things with this, but this is so fucking beautifully put, and no one reads Klossowski, let alone this book. And so as we go, fuck it, we're going to keep going unless anyone wants me to stop. Because I just like this shit a lot. Intensity. Intensity is subject to a moving chaos without beginning or end. Thus, in each person, apparently as their own possession, there moves an intensity, its flux and reflux, forming significant or insignificant fluctuations of a thought that in fact belongs to no one, with neither beginning nor end. But if contrary to this undulating element, each of us forms a closed and apparently delimited whole, it is by virtue of these traces of signifying fluctuations, that is to say, a system of signs that I will here call the code of everyday signs, as to where our own fluctuations start or stop. Is that flashing? I keep feeling flashing out of the corner of my eye, but then I'm not seeing it. Makes me feel like I'm having a heart, like, is the screen flashing for YouTube? I don't know what's happening. It's very weird. Yeah, it's flickering. Why the fuck would it flicker? It's because it's 57 FPS. Why would it do that? Let's see. Okay, let's see. We'll go. We'll see if this fixes it. There's an issue with frame rate compatibility, I think, because it's just off enough, but I'm not sure. Let me continue. Give me an F if it flickers. Actually, don't, because that could mean the stream disconnects. Just write and be like, hey, it's probably fucking flickering. Just let me know. But to re-say, as to where our own fluctuations start or stop, so that the signs can permit us to signify, to speak to ourselves and others, we know nothing, except that there is one sign in this code that always corresponds to either the highest or lowest degree of intensity, namely the self, the I, the subject of all our propositions. It is thanks to this sign. Flecked again, didn't it? Damn it. Let me see if I can change windows if that helps. One moment. Move you over. We'll go here, and then we move you up. See if that fixes it. Let me know. I'm going to start again. Because again, he's speaking personally here. He's now speaking to all of us in our experience. This is where he's setting up. As to where our own fluctuations start or stop. I just realized in Discord I'm sharing the wrong fucking page. I am a terrible person. One moment. Say there's Discord. One moment. Let's move you over. Switch windows to... I don't know if this will work. We'll find out. It is. Excellent. Good. Happy day. That'll be a perfectly fine thing then. Okay, back to the reading. Now on Discord, you guys can read along. Sorry, it's a new thing. As to where our own fluctuation start or stop, so that the signs can permit us to signify. Again, this is important semiological language. Signs enable us to signify. Signification is the use of the sign in communication, more or less. I'm simplifying. We know nothing. Again, where our own fluctuations start or stop, we know nothing. Except there is one sign in this code that always corresponds to either the highest or lowest degree of intensity, namely the self, the I, the subject of all our propositions. It is thanks to the sign, which nonetheless is nothing but an always variable trace of fluctuation, that we constitute ourselves as thinking, that a thought as such occurs to us, even though we are never quite sure if it is not others who are thinking and continue to think in us. But what is this other that forms the outside in relation to the inside we believe ourselves to be? Everything is led back to a single discourse, namely, to fluctuations of intensity that correspond to the thought of everyone and no one. The sign of the self in the code of everyday communication, insofar as it corresponds to the strongest or weakest intensity, and establishes a correspondence between our own degrees or of presence or absence, the degrees of presence and absence of the outside, thus assures a variable state of coherence, both within ourselves and with our surroundings. The thought of no one, this intensity in itself, without any determinable beginning or end, finds a necessity in the agent that appropriates for itself, and is assigned a destiny within the vicissitudes of memory and the forgetting of itself or the world. Nothing could be more arbitrary once we admit that everything is on a single circuit of intensity. For a designation to be produced, for meaning to be constituted, my will must intervene. But again, this is nothing more than this appropriated intensity. This is straight up just to lose. There, you guys get to see. Hi. And you know what I see right here? Look at that like ratio. Thank you, guys. It's hard for me to when we talk about intensities and the fluxion, and again, there's a reason I do not like the word flow. I'm very, very strongly against the word flow for a lot of reasons. But this is why, because the importance of this is intensity, and intensity doesn't flow. That's stupid. That's like an incompatibility. It moves you back to the symbolic to try to go, well, look, it's kind of like an intensive flow. It's like, the fuck does that even mean? Well, it's like vibes. It's like bullshit. Fuck off. No. It's an intensive flux. It's a fluctuation of intensivity. It makes a lot more sense because it's the fucking terminology that exists for these terms. This is a thing. They're not like trying to really divine like some brand new way to talk about stuff. They're using these terms as they're used in all of these other fields and bringing them in because this self that he's talking about here is, as he talks about it, this single line of fluctuation, single wire of it, this single thing that's pushing forward. It's this odd thing that continues as we play. The thought of no one, this intensity in itself, without any determinable beginning or end, finds a necessity in the agent that appropriates it for itself. The I, remember the one, it is the one who's conducting and then the I who claims it. This is the thing that he said, that he's bringing it back. The thought of no one, the intensity in itself without any determining beginning or end, finds a necessity in the agent, the support, that appropriates it for itself, and is assigned a destiny within the vicissitudes of memory and the forgetting of itself or the world. Nothing could be more arbitrary once we admit that everything is on a single circuit of intensity. For a designation to be produced, for meaning to be constituted, my will must intervene, but again, this is nothing more than this appropriated intensity. Now in Stimmung, in a tonality that I will designate as the highest feeling, that I will aspire to maintain as the highest thought, what has happened? Have I not surpassed my own limits, and thereby depreciated the everyday code of signs, either because thought abandons me or else because I can no longer discern the difference between fluctuations from without and those from within? Up to now, in the everyday context, thought was always referred back to me in the designation myself. But what becomes of my own coherence at that degree of intensity where thought ceases to refer back to me in the designation myself and instead invents a sign by which it would designate its own coherence with itself? If this sign is no longer my own thought, does it not signify my exclusion from all possible coherence? If it is still mine, how could it conceivably designate an absence of intensity at the highest degree of intensity? Let us now suppose that during such a high tonality of the soul, an image of the circle is formed. Something happens to my thought in this sign in regards to itself as dead, as no longer my own. My thought enters into such a strict coherence with it that the invention of the sign of the circle takes on the power of all thought. Does this mean that the thinking subject would lose its own identity in a coherent thought that would itself exclude identity? There's nothing here to distinguish the designating intensity from the designated intensity, to reestablish the coherence between the self and the world, as constituted by everyday designations. A single circuit brings me back to the code of everyday signs, and then makes me depart, again leaving me at the mercy of the sign, as soon as I try to explain to myself the event it represents. For if, in this ineffable moment, I hear myself say, you are returning to this moment. You've already returned to it. You will return to it innumerable times. No matter how coherent this proposition may seem to be in terms of the sign of the circle from which it is derived, for it is itself this very proposition. As an actual self in the context of everyday signs, I myself fall into incoherence. And this is a double manner. In relation to the coherence of this thought itself and in relation to the code of everyday signs, according to the latter, I can only will myself once and for all. It is on the basis that all my designations and their communicable meaning are constituted, but to re-will myself one more time indicates that nothing ever succeeds in getting constituted in a single meaning once and for all. The circle opens me to inanity and encloses me in the following alternative. Either everything returns because nothing has ever had any meaning whatsoever, or else nothing has ever had a meaning except through the return of all things without beginning or end. I fucking love this book. Sorry. I just fucking really love this book. And this is the nature of existence, is the oscillation between the memories and the experience of what you're having in the moment. And it's instantaneous and it's continuous. And the idea that your mind exists as like this ongoing, consistent thing that also is simultaneously processing everything that's happening outside of it. And simultaneously all this stuff is actual, is just such a set of layers of silly bullshit that we've convinced ourselves of. It, again, works into its own sort of self-creating power. Here is a sign in which I myself am nothing, a sign to which I always return for nothing. What is my part in this circular movement in relation to which I am incoherent, or in relation to this thought that is so perfectly coherent that it excludes me at the very moment I think it. What is this sign of the circle that empties every designation of its content for the sake of this sign? The high tonality of the soul becomes the highest thought only by restoring the intensity to itself, by integrating the chaos from which it emanates with the sign of the circle which it has formed. The circle says nothing through itself, except that existence has meaning only in being existence, that signification is nothing but an intensity. This is why the intensity is revealed in the high tonality of the soul. But how can intensity attack the actuality of the self, this self that is nonetheless elated by this high tonality? By liberating the fluctuations that were signifying it as a self in such a manner that it is the past that rings out anew in its present. It is not the fact of being there that fascinates Nietzsche in this moment, but the fact of returning in what becomes for Nietzsche this necessity, which was lived and must be relived, defies the will and the creation of meaning. In the circle, the will dies by contemplating this returning within becoming, and is reborn only in this discordance outside the circle, whence the constraint exercised by the highest feeling. Fuck, it's so good. That is, however, a nice solid 2 hours for me. I'm probably going to return tonight. I'm probably going to start. I need to get a script or two done, so I'm going to try to bolt those out. Do I continue the stream and just kind of make it a working stream as I go? Yeah. Let's leave it open for a moment. Are there questions on today's reading? Are there questions in general on Anti-Oedipus? What can I help you folks with? We'll give it a little bit of time and we'll talk through a few of those things, if that sounds all right to all of you. If you don't have any questions, I'm happy to bounce out. But otherwise, open house time. Take questions or other things. I just absolutely fucking love that. I love that. I love that book so much. It's hard for me to describe how much I fucking love that book. It really is. You can. I don't know if you can tell as I'm reading it. I find it like musical as he writes, and it's so crisp and clear. And again, punches at some very particular things of my own experience and my own understanding of things. It's just fantastic.
Hey, Brooks.
Hey there.
Are you not streaming anymore, are you?
I am on YouTube.
Oh, no. Okay, I have to stop talking then.
Okay, I will. If YouTube doesn't have anything for me, I will be turning YouTube off, though. So, yeah, we'll give it a second, then you can say hi anytime, 61. Right after that, I'll let you know. But I guess that'll do it. Be watching for Monday. I'm going to try to finish my script out and get that recorded. We're starting How to Philosophy this week. So Thursday next week is going to have a new stream set up for me where I'm just going to be talking through the books that are in it, but not really in a conventional way. That's the whole point of the How to Philosophy series, is to talk through kind of how to read philosophy or how to do philosophy, not simply memorize things, because it's one of the consistent things. I put it in the video, but it's a consistent thing I've noticed in all these people who do like, let me explain this concept. And then what they do is what they do directly is not teach someone how to engage with the concept, but they basically recite words that they've seen around the concept, which is fucking stupid and really bad philosophy, because philosophy is not riddles. As I said in the video, it's not about reciting things. It's not, oh, I know Plato because I can recite every part of this dialogue. How I understand Aristotle because I've read this and can recite. It's like, no, you don't. Like, logic doesn't even work that way. Bertrand Russell would slap the shit out of you if you just memorized a bunch of shit and said it back. The whole point is that all of these things are like productive. They're stuff to work with. They're things to be done with. There is a way to do philosophy. It's like, it'd be like trying to say that you're going to be going for like a doctorate in chemistry by memorizing the periodic table. It's like, fuck off. That's not what they do. They don't walk around and go, hey, Byzantium. That's not fucking science. But somehow that's philosophy to people. So I'm sick of it. So that's How to Philosophy is the course. And we're going to see what we can do on all of that and see how we can sort of set it up. So that'll be fun. With that, I'm going to go ahead and make it out. Do I have a green screen or was that a joke? I have shelves behind me. Of course it's not a joke. These are real books. I don't... What? These are real books. Or are they? Or are they? We'll see. Maybe not. Maybe it is. I said I had a green screen on a fold. Oh, maybe I do. Don't you like that? Isn't that your favorite thing that you've heard me say, Estelle? There. Don't go anywhere, YouTube. I'm going to fuck with YouTube for a second, everyone, and I'll be back, and we'll close it out. No, I'll do it later. I just have books. It's just books there. You guys enjoy. I'll see you later. Thank you, YouTube. If you like the stream, if you like this, do join the QC. I know most of you are in there. If you can afford to support, a couple bucks always helps on Patreon, patreon.com/DGQC. Every dollar helps. Genuinely, I'd like to be able to do this more and not have to be panicked about cash and trying to find jobs in a lot of places. It'd be very nice to be able to do this more full time, which would be very, very good. But otherwise, super chats, memberships, all those fun things. And with that, I will say, see you later, YouTube.